Hi, welcome to Inform Air Travel. Tonight's session will be led by Ross. So I'm going to let Ross introduce himself. Over to you, Ross.
Yes, thanks, Kath. So, I've in all my notes that I've written, the one thing I didn't do was the introduction, so this bit's just off the cuff. So, I'm Ross. I am a 45-year-old male with spinal muscular atrophy type 2. For anyone who needs a visual description, I have more hair on my face than I do on my head nowadays. I'm sat in my lounge with a bit of a florally orange wallpaper and telly behind me in a blue jumper. I work full time for a large bank, and then I guess kind of into today's relevance. So I've been traveling the world via air travel since a very young age, but independently since sort of my late teens, early 20s. And I guess I'll dive straight in on that note if that's cool with you, Kath. Awesome, cool. So I'm really, I've been delighted by Kath to be asked to be here today. And as I say, I have got my notes here because there's no way I could deliver this like off the cuff without having planned it and put together. So I'm just going to ping up some slides as well. So just get those up. So really happy to be here. I want to talk to you today about how you plan, prepare, and I guess truly enjoy a holiday. It's very much from an electric wheelchair user's perspective. So, as I said, I've been traveling for sort of 30 years. I think travel can seem like really daunting. It doesn't have to be. And I guess what I'm hoping today is break it down a bit step by step for you into, right from thinking about going on holiday to all the way getting back, returning home, like ready to book your next adventure. So my mission is to share my wisdom. It might be booking your first trip, might be booking another trip, or just maybe improve your existing experience if you're already someone that's familiar with air travel from a disability and wheelchair user perspective with sort of neuromuscular conditions. So these are the things I'm going to cover today. It's not death by PowerPoint. You're going to mainly listen to me. Really happy to take some questions. We've also got Alison who's going to talk to you after sort of my section 2 about kind of just before we talk about getting your support about kind of like ensuring you are safe to fly. First things first, let's get into like researching your destination. So I think that's kind of like you've got a good holiday starts with your research, and I think a wheelchair friendly destination doesn't just mean accessible transport or hotels. It's about how that whole entire experience is going to fit into your lifestyle and your needs. And I guess kind of like there are lots of things you can do. I mean, in the world of social media, we're all connected to various people with similar disabilities. There's lots of groups on Facebook, like Living with Duchenne's, Living with SMA, booking holidays with SMA. So they're a good place to kind of start. And I guess look at blogs, forums, where there are fellow wheelchair users, similar disabilities. They share their experiences. There's also a couple of good websites like Accessible Travel, Wheelchair Travel, The Rolling Traveller, and they kind of give like specific insights into locations. There's a chap in America called Curb Free with Corey Lee, who has travelled all over the world with spinal muscular atrophy, and he shares loads of detailed videos. I think one of the things though that's really important to remember about bloggers is that they focus on their own needs and not necessarily anybody else's. And as much as their information is really useful, it's your disability and it's your requirements that are often unique to you. And to bring that to life, a good friend of mine with SMA, Martin Sibley, went to Spain. He recommended a hotel to me, and I booked it. And it was very clear within 5 minutes of being there that our needs and our expectations of what an accessible hotel were very different. So it's really important to do your research. Think about, what you're going to do when you're on your holiday. Again, this is really personal. I'm 45. Like when I go on holiday, I generally want to just sit in the hotel, by the pool, in the sunshine, and unwind and take away the stress of day-to-day life and work. But if you're a bit younger, you probably want to go explore, take pictures, make memories. So when you're doing your research, think about like museums, parks, theatres, attractions. Do they have access? Have they got toilets? Some places might be really beautiful, but they're not wheelchair friendly. Outside of the UK, you're not going to find like changing places toilets everywhere. There is an international map that you can use, but it's not as reliable as we'd like it to be. In the countries that I've visited lots of countries, but in like the USA and the United Arab Emirates, quite often you'll find that the accessible toilet is contained within the specific gender assigned toilet. So if you're PA or carer, or depending what terminology you use, is the same sex as you, this doesn't present a problem. But I can tell you that there's many times I've been in America with my female team of carers, and we've taken a Russian roulette of whether I, as a male, am going to go into the female toilets, or whether them, as a female, is going to kind of come into the male toilets. And either way, it's not a particularly comfortable experience. Research things like transport and transfers. How accessible is local travel? Trains, buses, taxis. Sometimes, unfortunately, the best option is to rent an accessible vehicle for more flexibility. But renting is costly. When I've been to America and I hire a car, it can be just as costly as the hotel for 7 to 10 days. I think weather conditions are another thing to think about. So the climate's really important. So like extreme temperatures can make certain destinations less practical for us. So like I know that I would never go to Iceland on holiday. It would be a nightmare. I was meant to go to Sweden for work in December, and I'm kind of glad it didn't happen because, to be honest, I'm not sure I'd have survived with the cold, and equally the really hot. I've been to the United Arab Emirates in May, and I might as well have gone to Mars for a week. It was that hot. So, as much as I was looking forward to the heat, it was just too much. I spent far too much time in the shade. No two trips are the same. You need to think about a place that will work with your personal needs and your preferences. I think the other thing is I've learned as well that over the years things go wrong, and we'll talk a bit about that in a minute. But I always think of the worst case scenario. Imagine you get somewhere and actually you've done all your research, but the only thing you're going to be able to do on that holiday is enjoy the hotel and the grounds where you stay in. So I often try and think that, is the hotel going to give me enough entertainment for 7 days? And I'm not talking about like even entertainment. I'm talking about things like, is there a variety of food? Is there like a TV in the room? Sometimes I even make sure I take things like my laptop or my Fire Stick with me should things go wrong. So that's kind of a bit on research. I'll do a little bit on planning, and then we'll hand over to Alison. So again, you've got somewhere in mind that you want to go. Now, I guess like it's the time to plan. So I guess this is where the attention to detail can make a huge difference. So, some hotels and resorts will advertise accessibility features, so accessible rooms, ramps, lifts, rolling showers. What I'd say is don't hesitate to call or email that hotel or property directly to double check, because sometimes what they're advertising and what they're offering are two different things. If I'm doing this, and what I do, and this is probably one of my top tips, is I ask them for specific photos of the room that they're recommending that I use, and I make sure that that room is going to be available when I'm looking to travel. I ask them then to put that room on hold while I go and firm up my flights. Accessible sort of tours and experiences. Again, look into what like wheelchair accessible tours there are, or local services that cater for our needs. Some operators that you book a holiday through, they might be able to create a tailored experience for you, whether that's like doing something like a city tour or something more nature. Like what plan for support? So like which PA, if you're traveling with a PA, which PA are you going to take with you? Like different PAs are better suited to different environments. Again, wherever you're staying isn't going to be built around like your home and the specific accessibility needs that you've built. So things are going to take more time. They're going to be more difficult. Like I know, for example, when I have a shower on holiday and get dressed, it's not as quick as doing it at home. So that that's an impact on like your amount of time you get a day. Again, some of your PAs may be better suited to activities where that you're going to do that they might not like want to do. I know, like if I was thinking about my younger years, I'd want a PA that's quite comfortable with, maybe going to clubs and getting drunk and late nights and things like that. So just think about the person you're taking with you, and like kind of, this is really down to the individual relationships you have with the people that support you. And then just before we move on to Alison, so like I guess medical supplies and mobility like aids that we need. So again, depending on what your needs are, you might want to take equipment with you, or you might want to hire it. I personally take my own hoist with me. I take my portable shower chair commode. Other people that I know, they rent it. I just could not live with the anxiety of arriving and that not being right. Of course, like it's cheaper to maybe rent something for a week than to have something that you bought. My mobile hoist, best part of £2,000, and I, whilst I use it like occasionally at home to get on the sofa, like it comes out of the cupboard more often than when I'm going on holiday. But I guess you can't guarantee that what you're booking is going to be the thing that you have at home. So I'm really fussy about my shower chair commode. I wouldn't want, even when I've hired an accessible villa where they've got 3 or 4 of them in the garage, I still take my own because I know what I like and I know it works for me. You also need to check that the airline that you're traveling with will be happy to include these extra pieces of baggage without additional cost. So you shouldn't really be paying additional cost because of your needs. That should be a reasonable adjustment. Or if they are going to charge you, that it's not some ridiculous amount of money. Because excess baggage is usually done on weight, and a hoist in its case is about 45 kilos. You're going to be paying 45 kilos of weight. So I think I'll pause there before I talk about getting your support in place and just hand over to Alison.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me all right? Give me a thumbs up if you can hear me, or nod or something. Yeah, lovely.
I can. Can you introduce yourself, Alison, please?
Yeah, of course I will. Of course I will. Thank you. Well, evening, everybody. My name is Alison Armstrong. I'm a nurse consultant, and I work in the North East Assisted Ventilation Service. We support patients on long-term ventilation and cough augmentation throughout the North East and Cumbria. So we see a lot of patients that undertake airline travel with some kind of respiratory muscle weakness or respiratory disease. So we have over the years developed what I think is quite a robust way of assessing those. I'd like to thank Kath and Pathfinders for inviting me to come and share this with you today. It's, I think, a bit of a whistle-stop tour, and I'm going to rattle through some of the slides, but perhaps pay more attention to the slides that I think are more relevant to you as a traveller. So I shall share my presentation with a bit of luck. You should be able to see that okay. So the first thing I'm going to say is that for all this talk is going to come across, as being quite risk averse. My underlying message here is that I want you to travel, and I want you to travel safely. So you'll recognize some of the people in these photos, I think, that have been kindly shared with me. And, they just illustrate is that it's very, very important to us that people, regardless of their level of disability or dependency on technology, they are enabled to undertake the same activities that I take for granted. So I just wanted to put that on as my kind of first slide. I want to make life better. I've now frozen it. What about if I do that? There we are. So not going to spend too much time on this particular slide. I just want you to know that when you're at sea level, the oxygen that's in the atmosphere that you're breathing, as you probably know, is 21%. The rest of the air, the rest of the atmosphere is made up mostly of nitrogen. When you go up in an aircraft, all commercial aircrafts the cabin is pressurized to 8,000 feet. That means that it's a safe level of what we call hypoxia, a safe level of low oxygen, but it is a much lower level of oxygen that's at sea level. So it equates to about 15%. So for everybody, all of the passengers, the cabin crew, the pilot, they're all breathing that same concentration or equivalent to that concentration of 15%. So there's a significant drop. That little graph there shows you that it's not that technical. If you look at the curve at the top, anything from 100%, which is on the right-hand side, to about 90% oxygen saturations in your blood. The fall is quite gradual. So it doesn't fall away quickly. But once your oxygen saturations hit 90, 85, 80%, the fall is rapid. And that's what that graph illustrates. So for people who have any kind of respiratory impairment, we need to make sure that your oxygen saturations are not going to be compromised below that threshold, below that 85, 90%. This is me. So this is me measuring myself on a flight to Spain. What you're looking at here from the left to the right is time. So, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, for argument's sake, on the left-hand side, 5 o'clock in the afternoon on the right-hand side. The blue line is my heart rate. The red line is my oxygen saturations. And I know you won't be able to see the numbers in detail, but like all of you, my saturations at sea level, 97, 98% sitting on the tarmac. Within the first half an hour of that 3-hour flight, you can see as we reached altitude, my oxygen saturations began to fall and sat during that flight, excuse me, somewhere between about 88 and 92%. Now, I don't have respiratory muscle weakness. I don't have any lung disease. So this is what's happening to everybody on the aircraft. So add in somebody who's got dependency on ventilation or any kind of muscle weakness or lung disease, that's going to be potentially significantly worse. So that illustrates that this is a kind of real thing. And what's the impact of these problems? Well, you can see on the screen there, there's all kinds of things that can go wrong. These are just articles I've pulled from the web when people have become unwell during flight. But in no order of priority, if there's a flight diversion because somebody becomes unwell, there's expense, there's inconvenience, there's the environmental issue if you've got to send an aircraft somewhere where it wasn't anticipating to go. There's huge challenges to the airline crew if they're having to deal with somebody who becomes unwell. It's very distressing for the other passengers, but the priority is that it can cause harm or even death, as in some of these cases, if somebody becomes unwell during flight. Now, excuse me, there's been quite a bit of research to look into how we keep people safe during flight, and the underlying message is provided sufficient preparation and planning and assessments are performed in advance, it's safe. So whilst I scaremongered on my previous slide, actually provided there's appropriate planning and appropriate assessments, airline travel for people with respiratory disease is safe. The British Thoracic Society have led on this, and the most recent guidance was published in 2022, and that tells us who we need to assess and how those assessments should be performed. The main change to the guidance, which was originally 2011, it was revised in 2013, and the main change over that decade is, and this is of interest for those of you on this meeting, is that it includes patients outside of those with respiratory disease. So when the guidance was first written 10, 12 years ago, it was for patients with COPD who had that lung disease and often a requirement for oxygen at sea level. There's now a recognition that there are other people who have other respiratory problems that need to be included. So people who have restrictive lung disease because of respiratory muscle weakness are now catered for in this recent guidance. It also looked more in detail about the hypoxic challenge test, which is the test for whether or not you need oxygen during flight, which I'm going to show you, but also reference to the fact that if you do need supplementary oxygen during flight, that has changed significantly. It was beginning to change pre-COVID. COVID escalated those changes, and now it's in a very different place. Now, the screening that takes place, according to the guidance, anybody who has an underlying respiratory problem or respiratory illness, however you want to define that, should have this assessment. They should have a review of symptoms, any current treatments, and their previous experience of air travel. Somebody who flies regularly 5 times a year and doesn't have any problems, that's a brilliant measure of how well they'll perform on the next flight. Somebody who says, oh, I did go away last year, I was really poorly, I got hospitalized when I got there, it took me 2 weeks to get over my chest infection, and I felt dreadful on the way back. That tells us something about how they will be during a flight. The journey requirements and the destination, I know Russ talked a little bit about this, but think about the planning of that journey. We want to know, is there any overnight element to the journey that might mean, if you're a ventilator user during sleep, then traveling at 15% oxygen concentration in the environment and going to sleep is adding more risk to your respiratory health when you travel. So we need to think about those, whether there's any transfers or delays, potential delays in the journey. So all of that kind of journey itinerary is something that I want to know about when I'm assessing my patients. And then where the screening that's taken place there raises kind of concerns about the patient, then we would recommend, the guidance recommends, that a hypoxic challenge test, HCT, is performed to assess whether any supplementary oxygen during flight would be appropriate. In our service, in the northeastern Cumbria, anybody that is under my care, because they're either on a ventilator or they receive cough augmentation, we would recommend that they have this hypoxic challenge test prior to flight, because by virtue of the fact that they're on a ventilator, they have respiratory muscle weakness and respiratory failure. The important thing to remember is the hypoxic challenge test is not a fitness to fly assessment. The term fit to fly is used inappropriately. The hypoxic challenge test, which is an objective measure of whether oxygen is required, is part of an assessment to somebody's potential well-being during flight. So an accurate description of the hypoxic challenge test is really a pre-flight oxygen test. And what it looks like is this. So instead of breathing room air with 21% oxygen in the atmosphere, we want you to breathe, for the simulation, we want you to breathe 15%. And we do that by using nitrogen. That cylinder there is not oxygen, it's nitrogen. Remember, I said to you that probably 79%, give or take 1 or 2% in the atmosphere here is mostly nitrogen. And all we're doing in the simulation is we're flipping the balance a bit. So we're delivering more nitrogen so that that person having the test receives less oxygen, and run at a certain flow rate with that little red connector, which is a 40% Venturi, that person will be breathing 15% oxygen. We run the test for 20 minutes and we measure oxygen saturations using a finger probe for the full 20 minutes. If you remain above 85% during the test, you don't need supplementary oxygen during flight. If you drop below 85, you do. So it's a very algorithm, protocol-based kind of test. Very briefly to say, if you have restrictive lung disease, respiratory muscle weakness, and the decision or the recommendation is that you require supplementary oxygen during flight, there are some risks to having oxygen without breathing support. And many of you will already know this. So the movement of your lung gets oxygen in and it gets carbon dioxide out, and it's controlled by a chemical receptor in your brain as to how much that needs to move for all of us. If we give you lots of oxygen and your blood oxygen goes up, that little receptor in your brain says, there's loads of oxygen in my body, I don't need to breathe very hard, and your already compromised breathing is compromised further, and you're not going to move very much air at all because your body has told you to just calm it down a little bit. That means that you'll get a buildup of carbon dioxide in the blood. And this study illustrated that in very significantly, that there were high levels of carbon dioxide for somebody who was given what we call unopposed oxygen. For this patient group who use ventilation, who have respiratory muscle weakness, we hypothesized that it's probably better to use a ventilator during flight if you drop your oxygen levels on the test than using oxygen, because actually there's nothing wrong with the lungs in the context of respiratory muscle weakness. It's more the mechanics of moving the air. So we've devised a way, and there isn't time to go through that in detail, but it's basically a way of doing that test that I just showed you with the nitrogen cylinder and the mask. It's doing that same simulation for somebody whilst they're using a ventilator. So we can demonstrate that with ventilation, their oxygen saturations will be fine. I've done that a few times now. If supplementary oxygen is required, this has changed a lot. The European Lung Foundation has a directory of airlines which says what each airline provides or doesn't provide in terms of oxygen. In fairness, there are hundreds and it's rarely up to date. So I don't think that's a great resource. Always speak to the airline directly if there is an oxygen requirement and see what their individual provision is. Very few airlines now provide oxygen. That is something that's changed since COVID. Very, very few. It has to be hired, and it's no longer prescribable on the NHS. So it has to be hired privately by the patient, and it's really, really expensive. And that little note at the bottom, if ventilation and oxygen are required, because people can have respiratory muscle weakness and also have lung disease, it has to be a machine like the one that you see in the picture, a portable oxygen concentrator that delivers oxygen continuously and not in a pulse dose. And again, time doesn't allow for me to go through that in detail, but just talk to your ventilation team about that if you are going to need oxygen and ventilation during flight, because the equipment is quite specific. The other thing that you need to talk to the airline about is whether they have any specific requirements in terms of medical forms to be filled in. Very, very few airlines don't want this filled in if you require oxygen and or non-invasive ventilation during the flight. What it does, it illustrates, there's a part for yourselves to fill in and a part for your clinical team to fill in, and an opinion from the doctor that looks after you as to whether he or she thinks that you will be safe during flight with whatever recommendations have been made. And that's something that it's very important to have in advance. I've had 2 people in the last 12 months have arrived at the check-in desk and have been refused boarding the aircraft. Both of them never got on that flight. One of them managed to get on a flight the following day, which was an Emirates flight to Dubai to join a cruise. The other one didn't get on at all because there were no spaces available. Different occasions. So I would hate anybody to be in that position. Just check with the airline. You're traveling with a ventilator, whether you're carrying it as hand luggage or whether you're actually going to use it. Make sure that the medical forms are filled in, and each airline has their own MEDIF. It's called a MEDIF, the medical form. And that's just an example of a Jet 2 one. Now, coming to the final part of my talk, which just illustrates some of the hints and tips of what you can do to consider in order to keep yourself safe during flight. We talked about the time and the duration of the flight. Is it overnight? Is it during the day? Short-haul daytime flights are the best because you get a good night on your ventilator the night before and you're fresh to travel the same day. Think about your stopovers and your destination in terms of altitude. Flying out of another airport. So I'm in the Northeast, I'm in Newcastle. Some of my patients might fly out of Manchester if they're going to Florida, for example. I would want them to travel to Manchester the night before. I don't want them to be on what they consider to be a daytime flight. So they're in on 9 o'clock flight at Manchester. They've got to check in at 6, means they're leaving home at 2 in the morning to get to Manchester on time. That isn't a daytime flight. Try and factor in all of those things to make sure that you're as good as you can be when you board that flight. And always factor in potential delays. Those of you that travel will know that transport outside of the UK, and particularly rail travel inside the UK, is notoriously unreliable. So always factor that in. We recommend that anybody traveling outside of the UK takes a spare ventilator. All of our patients can access our team during daytime hours to request another machine if theirs breaks down, and that will go out the following day or the same day if possible. If you're outside of the UK, that can't happen. And if your machine fails and you're on holiday for a week or a fortnight, that's 2 weeks without your ventilator. So take a spare. We always give all of our patients a letter just on hospital letterhead to recommend their equipment is carried as hand luggage, just in case they have any challenges at security that can say that it's a medical device. Any other spare equipment, consider that might need to be illustrated on that hand luggage letter. Do you take a humidifier? Is there a cophysys machine? Make sure it's all detailed and make sure the airline know about it. And if you're traveling somewhere where the electrical facility is different, make sure there's compatibility, especially on a cruise and places like that. Make sure that your ventilator and your equipment, nebulizer, whatever it is that you take, can be powered at the destination. So preparation is key. This is some guidance. You don't have to read that we give to our patients so that they have this in a document prior to travel and they know to get in touch with us to discuss these arrangements. The advice that we give everybody that's traveling is, where possible, remain awake during the flight. That's why we say if it's a short haul daytime flight, that's very achievable. If it's a nighttime flight, then clearly you've got to fall asleep, but we would want to make provision for NIV use. I recommend that you increase your use of non-invasive ventilation either side of the journey. Traveling is really, really tiring. You've been in a 15% environment for 4 hours. When you arrive at your destination, even if it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon and you only normally use your ventilator, the bed, I would suggest you put it on for half an hour. Just give yourself a little boost. Avoid anything that's going to make you sleepy. We all like to have a drink at the airport, but anything with sedative properties that's going to depress your breathing any more than it already is should be avoided. Consider travel insurance, really, really important, and especially make sure in the small print it includes unscheduled diversions or early return to the UK. If your flight gets diverted because you become unwell, you don't want your insurance company to try and wriggle out of paying for that flight diversion. And my last girl guide tip is a roll of tape. Things break. Pack a little roll of tape in your bag. Tape for your tubing, tape for your mask, anything that might drop apart. It's handy to have. This is a website that we've developed over the last couple of years, the Home Mechanical Ventilation in Partnership Group. There's lots of information on there for anybody using home mechanical ventilation, but there is a section on, sorry, I haven't shown you that. There is a section on travel advice. So please head to that website for any information in relation to travel or other things to do with home ventilation. And I finish where I started. The important thing is that we're adding life to years, not just years to life. Those are my references if you're going to get copies of these slides, which show all of the guidance. And I'm very happy to take any questions. My contact details are on the screen.
Thank you, Alison. If there are any questions, we could put them in the Q&A or the chat, because I believe Alison's going to be leaving us in a little bit, so she won't be here at the end of the session when Ross will be answering questions. I have seen that there are some questions for Ross already, and we have seen them, and we will be answering them at the end of the webinar.
Cool. Carry on, yeah.
I think so. Thank you ever so much, Alison, and I will forward all of your contact details for those people that have attended.
My pleasure. Thank you very much, everybody.
Really useful. Really useful. I've definitely learned a few things that I didn't know there. I will try and move swiftly through what we've got left to cover so that we get to those questions that I can see at the end, and I know the answer to one of them definitely. Getting your support in place. So I think, you know, if you're living with our types of disability, let's be honest, it's unlikely you're going to be traveling on your own. You probably receive some form of care package, I'm assuming, but I'm assuming we probably do. I would say before you book any flight, any accommodation, it's worth checking that you have the budget to take your PA away with you. You also need to think about the finer details, like, you know, are you funding your carers' meals and drinks, or do you have a package that allows you to do this? I know, you know, different social services, different PHBs, it's very different. It's a bit of a postcode lottery. You know, is the PA that you want to take away with you available when you want to go on holiday? If you need double up support, do you have sufficient budget to have 2 people away with you getting paid 24/7 for a week or 2 weeks? Or can you maybe agree that, you know, they might get 12 hours off a day if there's 2 of them, or 5 hours off a day, they go and, you know, enjoy a bit of sunshine. They might be able to go and do a bit of their own sightseeing. You know, and if you're going somewhere hot, you know, like kind of that might be something they want to go and do, relax for a little bit. Do you need to speak to your budget provider to see if there's actually any extra funds available for you to go away? I know some local providers allow you to use respite to pay for towards you to have a bit of a break, but again, I'm not offering that is guaranteed. It's very much a postcode lottery. I think the other thing is get your travel insurance in place right at the moment you book. It's so important to have it and make sure that it covers your core disability and any other secondary disabilities. So like we've just covered on here, you know, you might have SMA, but you also might have respiratory. I would make sure you list them both and make sure you put everything down. And also, like, you know, if you're traveling with a PA, do they have their own travel insurance? Can you afford to support their travel insurance? Do they have any hidden disabilities that you don't know about or medical conditions. And then finally, I guess, kind of like, how are you going to get to the airport? Are you leaving your vehicle there? If you are, will your vehicle fit in the car park? If you've got one of these adapted Mercedes Sprinters that's taller than 2.1 meters, is it going to fit in the car park at the airport? So lots of things to consider around kind of getting your support in place before you push that final booking button. So that moves us nicely on to booking. So I guess some people think this is the easiest part, but I'd say it's, again, a really critical part of the journey. If you're booking through a travel provider, whether you're disabled or not disabled, a reputable company is important, but one that's got an experience of handling accessibility needs. There are some specialist travel providers that you can use. If you're booking with a hotel direct, again, think about a reputable brand. And I guess my biggest piece of advice with all of this, especially if you book with a hotel direct, is to get written confirmation that they have booked that specific room with you, even the room number. Because I've turned up before in many times in my younger days where I thought I'd booked it, and they're like, "Oh no, we're putting you in this room," and I'm like, "That room's not going to work for me." So either I'm going on the first flight home at your expense, or you're going to get me in the room that we agreed when I booked. So be strong, be what you booked, and make sure you've got what you need. And I think kind of that can quickly turn a negative situation into a positive when you arrive. Booking early is important as well. Not every hotel, they might only have one accessible room, or a villa might be in high demand during like seasonal holidays. So, peak times, get it booked early. And I guess that gives you the best chance of getting what you want. You can use accessible travel agencies. They often then can do everything for you, like coordinate the flights, the accommodation, the transfers, and you're relying that everything goes smoothly and it's on them. I think personally, I've developed a bit of my own process, which I've already kind of touched on, but I guess I'm just going to quickly go through that. Like, I'll find out here's where I want to go, and I'm going to check it's going to meet my needs. I then contact the hotel or the owner of the particular property if I'm renting a villa, and to confirm, and I speak to my care team so I know they're 110% up for the trip. I then contact the place where I'm going to stay and ask them if I can basically place a booking or put a booking on hold with or without a deposit for a couple of days, maybe even a week. Generally, they're quite obliging if you explain what you're trying to do. And again, I've not just rang them up randomly. I might have messaged them before saying, "Look, I'm looking to book here around this time. I've got a few questions. I'm going to be in touch." So by building that rapport, they know you're not a chancer. It's a bit like people when you're selling a car. You put it on eBay and someone asks you a question, and you can just tell when someone is a tire kicker or they're generally interested in purchasing the car. So I guess again, and then once I've got that on hold, I contact the airline and book the flights, and again make sure that my needs are going to be taken into account. Another little tip I've used: I join most airlines' frequent flyer programs and gain miles, and then I use those miles to subsidise the cost of taking a PA with me. So I'm not here to sell it. I do have a Virgin Atlantic credit card, and it pretty much allows me once a year to go away and use the companion flight for my PA. So that saves me a huge amount of money. Again, you can sometimes talk to the airline about when to use any reward flights that you've got. That might negotiate the price down to a different price. Again, if you're more flexible on when you can travel. And then I guess kind of when I'm booking that hotel or that villa, I might, again, because the flights might not quite work or might not be available, maybe get them to place a hold on a slightly longer duration than the exact holiday you want. So quite often, one of the hotels that I stay at frequently, I'll say to them, "I'm looking to come between these two dates for about 10 days, but can you hold the wide days while I go and sort the flights?" And then I work out what the cheapest flight is. And that might mean I go for 9 days or 11 days, because it might be cheaper, weirdly, to stay for longer on the flight part. Once you've got everything aligned and you're happy, that's when I push the green button and book everything. After that, I then generally ring the airline and book my special assistants and take care of the other smaller items. Again, a bit personal and sad. I keep a spreadsheet of all of these things and the costs and what I've paid and what I've not paid, so I know where I'm at. And again, if you're traveling with a power wheelchair, which I assume many of us are, check about the airlines' sort of policies on transporting it. Again, different airlines have different rules about checking it in at the gate or traveling to the door in your wheelchair. So again, just be really clear. And again, if you book early, you've got plenty of time to argue them about all those kind of things. So now you've kind of booked it, you start thinking about traveling to your destination. And I apologize, I'm going fast, but I want to get through all of this. So it's being recorded, so you can definitely play it back and slow down. And after this, more than happy for you to reach out and find me and ask some questions. But I guess traveling to the destination, for me, this doesn't start the night before I go or the day I go. This starts about 2 weeks ahead. And again, this is all down to your own personal preferences, but I'm sharing what works for me. So I think the journey can be the hardest part. And with preparation, you can kind of take a lot of the stress out. So packing tips. So I like to do this early because I think there's so much we need to take. It's not just about pants and clothes and caps and suntan lotion. It's like, what are the things like sliding sheets, a long charging cable, because I don't know how near the cable is going to be for my phone next to my bed. A spare hoist thing. What if the hoist thing that you take breaks and you've only taken one? So I basically like to kind of create a bit of a note document, and I share it on my phone. I share it with whoever is helping me pack, and I list all the clothes that we need to take, all the medication, and any other equipment. And then I ask my PA team to start working on the packing and ticking the things off that they've put in. And again, that also means that I also try to get the PA that's coming with me to do the packing, because if they help me pack, when we get to the other end, they know exactly where they've put the things. So they know where to find it. That kind of speeds things up. But also kind of, if you've got a list of what you're taking with you, as you get nearer to the time, you don't have that panic of have I remembered to put this in? And then also for the return journey, it might be that my carer has been with me for 2 weeks and she's desperate for a break. So somebody else is going to help me unpack. Well, having that list helps me give that list to them to say, these are the things I took. Can you just check I've not left anything behind? Okay, you've left the country and you've left something behind. But again, if you'd left a sling behind, you could contact the hotel and say, oh God, I've left my sling. Can you post it to me or something like that? In my carry-on luggage, I take things like medication. I take a sliding sheet in my hand luggage, because what if I arrive and my suitcase has gone missing? Like my slide sheet, my sling, and my wheelchair charger. They're the most important things that I need. I also take a spare pair of clothes, because again, if we arrive somewhere and my case has gone missing, I want at least a clean pair of pants or shorts at the top to wear for the first day. I can then deal with trying to get some other clothes. And I always take a toothbrush in my hand luggage as well. Diet, again, kind of going to the bathroom at an airport or on the plane is really challenging. Whether you're disabled or not, flying affects your bowels. I'm going to get talking about bowels here, so if it's a bit uncomfortable, I apologise, but this is reality. So in the days leading up to holiday, I really think about the type of food that I'm eating. I guess I don't want to risk being too regular, but I also don't want to risk being constipated. And I even know that on the shortest flight, where my fluid intake is going to be limited, that's going to have a knock-on effect. So in the days leading up to holiday, I just drink shed loads of water. And I also make sure that when I'm on a flight, especially long haul, I try and collect water on the plane, so that when I arrive in my destination, and once I've been for that first wee that I've not been able to do for however long the flight is, I'm able to immediately start hydrating. Because if I'm in, arrivals, waiting for my luggage, and I haven't got a drink with me, and I've got to wait till I get to the hotel, that could be another 2 hours. So I try and collect some fluid on the way, even taking an empty plastic bottle with me and asking the plane to fill it up with the water, so that when I get off the plane, I've got a drink. I think, the other thing is, for everyone, it's challenging, but this is more challenging for females than males. If you don't use a catheter and you arrive somewhere and there's no change in places facility, again, how are you going to go to the bathroom? So you might not even be able to drink until you start getting near your hotel. So I think you've really got to think about diets, food. Again, arriving at the airport, you might have booked all your assistants, and I've never been to a holiday where this has gone smoothly. So I never take I was at my last holiday that I went on, I was at the check-in desk and 4 other people next to me without disabilities checked in, and I still hadn't checked in. So allow extra time for booking in and arriving at the airport. Most airports provide priority check-in and security for people with disabilities. So again, in the airport, look out for that, and look out for the awkward word special assistance, a word that I really don't like. And in some of the work that I do in the air industry, I'm trying to get them to change special to additional, or like just assistance. Remember, again, you're going to get boarded on a plane probably about an hour before everybody else, and that you'll be on the plane potentially an hour after everybody else gets off. So a 2-hour flight is not a 2-hour flight for you. It's more like maybe a 3.5-hour flight. So that's the amount of time that you need to think about. You might not be able to visit the bathroom. Again, flying with your wheelchair, I don't know the statistic. It's ridiculous, but you're more likely to get your wheelchair damaged than not. So between checking in and arriving at the plane door to begin boarding, I take off everything off my wheelchair that could possibly get damaged. I think like the lateral supports, the joystick, the Omni screen, I've made it that they can all come off. I put them in my hand luggage or in an additional hand luggage bag. And I've actually, as I said, designed my wheelchair so most things can be removed quickly for air travel. I've also put a sticker that when I take the cushion off is written in 3 different languages. So the 3 most common languages that I think exist in the world. So English, Spanish, and Islamic. And it basically says, this wheelchair is my legs. If it gets damaged, it's going to ruin the holiday and I'll be returning straight on the next flight. So please take care when you handle this equipment. Touch wood, it's worked. Can't guarantee it'll work, but I think it helps. Again, a few tips for me. If you're on a flight that provides in-flight food and beverages, if you need help with your eating, it might be you can actually ask the cabin crew to delay your PA's meal until they've helped you, or give you your PA if you want them to eat first to make sure they're happy, and then eat you, because it's very difficult on these narrow plane seats with all of the little tiny trays to maybe try and feed somebody and help them eat at the same time. If you can't drink when you're offered a drink, but you want to drink, as I already said, near the end of the flight, store them. Sometimes you get offered free booze. Like if you get it, just say, I'll have that and a water, and can you not open the can of beer or the bottle of wine and put it in your hand luggage? And when you arrive at the destination and you're ready to kick back and relax, you've already got a free wine on you. You don't need to go and buy one, whatever your tip is. So that's another little tip. Temperature on planes can vary. I find more often than not that it's cold. So again, it's easier to take something off than it is put something on. So I always probably wear more, even if I'm going to a sunny air destination, than I need to, because it's nothing worse than being cold. And on short haul flights, they often don't have things like blankets. As I've already sort of touched on, when you arrive at your destination, you'll need to wait for the rest of the plane to empty. And if you're traveling with your wheelchair, it's at that point that you hopefully will be reunited with it at the plane door. It is your legal right to not leave the plane should your wheelchair not be waiting for you at the door. So no matter how much the crew want to get off, because the crew can't leave until you're off, no matter how much you're being rushed, if your wheelchair is not at the door of that plane, you do not have to get off. And it is your right, and that will soon get them moving it quickly. And also, you might want to check before you start moving that your wheelchair is working and everything's all right. And kind of, yeah, so even while and the passenger assistant waiting to start moving you, maybe get your PA to go and quickly check that the wheelchair isn't damaged. What I would say also is, even if you don't need assistance and you've got some people and you've got an electric wheelchair and you can travel your way through the airport, don't refuse assistance, because quite often they'll walk you to passport control and put you in the short lane so that you get through first. There are a few perks sometimes to being disabled, not many, but it is a little tip. So don't refuse any support. It might help you jump queues. They might even help you with your baggage as well. It's sometimes worth having a few of the local currency to give a little tip, because again, that might help out, and you're bound to see these people on your return journey, and they might be more willing to help you if you've given them a few euros or dollars or whatever it is. Again, one of the other things is, because you're so delayed to get plane, it's likely you get the baggage reclaim, your bags might be like the only ones left, or that baggage lane might be already ready for another flight, so your baggage might have moved. Typically, they put it to the side of that particular baggage number, but you might have to go and look for it and ask somebody. So again, it's worth put something notable on your case. You know, everybody's got a black case. I don't know. Put a sticker on it. Put a strap around it. Something that makes it really easily identifiable. And again, if you're traveling with a hoist, it might want oversized baggage. If you're using like some form of local or taxi company to move you from the airport to the destination, make sure they tie you down properly. So many times I've been put in the back of some kind of people carrier without any form of tie down. And because of this, I'm sure that my wheelchair's got a seatbelt on. So the worst case scenario is that I have got a seatbelt attaching me to my wheelchair. Not ideal, makes me feel a little bit safer, but that's my bare minimum. When you get to your destination, you're going to have a lot to set up. And unlike the able people who can come on their trunks and get to the pool and get that first beer or burger or whatever you want to do, you might have a lot to unpack. So going back to the planning stage, you might want to consider at what time the flight arrives and you start the holiday the way you want. And I think after years and years of travel, my preferred way to travel is to arrive at the destination when it's near bedtime, get straight into bed, get into the swing of things, and that's PA to rest. Depending on where you're going, it's not always possible. Most hotels are very accommodating. If you want some help setting things up in your room, just ask a member of staff. Don't forget, just ask for help. And again, know your rights. Familiarise your rights as a wheelchair user. In different countries, there's different laws, and being aware of these can help advocate for yourself when necessary. I'm conscious I've got 8 minutes to cover off the next 4 sections, so I'm going to rattle through this. So you're at your destination, and the goal is to achieve whatever it is that you want to achieve. So I think there's a few things to consider. Don't underestimate that traveling is tiring. You may have all these exciting plans to do loads of things, and hard to have one, but have a flexible plan or a backup plan should things not go how you want. I might have said this before, but I think it's always thinking about the worst case scenario as well. So always try to book a destination of a hotel or where it's going to be enjoyable. There's going to be some good food and some facilities. I rarely organise anything for the first day or maybe even the first few days. Flying can be stressful. You might arrive at your destination and you might have had a few arguments along the way. It can be really stressful getting used to a new environment and a new setup, not just for you, but for your PAs. Lack of sleep can make you feel sluggish. Change in the food and the water, we've already said, can affect your bodily functions. And I know I'm not happy until I've had my first good holiday poo. So again, like my tip there. One of the other things to consider is how you're being supported. And I think the best holidays I've had is when I've set the expectation with my PA on exactly what I want to achieve on the holiday. It is your holiday, but they might expect to be sightseeing and doing loads of great things that you can't maintain the energy for. It's also hard work for them looking after you overseas on holiday without all the same equipment. So bear in mind their energy levels too. Again, I've never been anywhere in the world where taxis that are accessible are readily available as they are in London. If you book something specific at a time, allow contingency and be prepared that it may not bring you back on time earlier as well. I've been stranded in places for hours waiting for taxis. I've been late to things I've booked. So I try not to rely on accessible taxis too much and look at all the accessible travel within the destination. In America, I very often use a bus because it's cheap, reliable, and they strap you in and they're really good. And again, sometimes there's no option but hiring a car. At the end of the day, it's your holiday. I'm not here to tell you what to do, but I do recommend having rest days between busy days. And finally, I wouldn't leave all your packing away till the last minute on your way home. Think about being organised, methodical. If you want to get the maximum out of every single day, sometimes spending 5 or 10 minutes every day just doing a bit of like tidying and packing of your few dirty clothes can save a load of stress on the last day. How are we doing, Kath, for time? Have we got to finish bang on 7 or can I run 5 minutes over?
It's fine. We can carry on a little bit. I'm all right to carry on a little bit if we need to. There's quite a few questions as well, so I'll lead you through those at the end.
Okay, so emergencies, they definitely can happen, and this is fresh in my memory. So I was on holiday in November last year, and my carer became very unwell. Well, more than that in a minute. But in terms of some basics, make sure your mobile phone is always charged. If for any reason you're left alone for a few minutes, make sure you're able to contact somebody to raise the alarm should an emergency happen. You know, it might be quite hard to contact the hotel, but the local emergency number, like, you need to have, or somebody at home that you can, you know, even if you have to ring somebody back home and say there's been an emergency, can you ring the hotel? Can you ring the local emergency services in the country I'm in? So things like, you know, higher risk activities. So, you know, I might even text if I've been before traveling away with just my PA, and I might have texted someone at home saying, just going for a shower for an hour. I'll message you once I come back out, just so, like, again, people are aware of like what's going on. And, you know, you could be, you know, I remember, you know, if something happened, you could be stranded in a hotel for hours before housekeeping come to the room. So just keep in regular contact with people. I think if I'm staying in a self-managed accommodation, again, it could be days before anyone knew of a potential emergency. So just think about how you can raise the alarm if it's just you and your PA traveling. Make sure your PA knows all about your disability, your medication, and all of your history. If they don't, maybe have a document with you that could outline it to somebody else should you be in a position where you can't communicate your needs. In terms of your wheelchair and any other equipment, you know, look, I always know where the nearest permobil dealer is where I'm going away. Maybe take some tools, maybe take a bit of backup equipment. You know, I put a small set of tools in my suitcase because occasionally things have gone wrong and you can fix your own problem. I'm not saying fix your own problem, but sometimes you can fix them in an emergency. Ignoring disability slightly, you know, what happens if you're delayed? Did you pack enough pants? Did you pack enough clothes? Have you got extra medication with you? What I'm saying here is, like, if you're going away for 7 days, assume it could be 10. If it's 14, assume it could be 20. You know, like, you know, if you're on Risdiplam, for example, you know, don't just take the 12 days doses that you're going for. Take like 2 lots of doses. You know, is there a laundrette? You know, it could be, but it's a lot easier to have a spare pair of pants with you. Again, back to this recent experience, I cannot stress how much it is to have a contingency plan. So my PA became very unwell on holiday. They had to be taken to hospital. I had to basically fly out a PA from home and get her to fly out. All of a sudden, I had to do the expense to do this. Probably that was the least of my worries. I think it was the fact that my PA had made their own plans, but they were willing to, like, not follow through with those plans and come away. And I never really thought about that before I go away. So now when I go away, I need to think, actually, who's my backup PA? Are they going to be on holiday out of the country? You know, are they ready to potentially come and rescue me? My PA took ill at 10 p.m. on the local time, and it was 30 hours before I could get somebody out there. Luckily, I'd travelled with some family, but they were in their sort of late 70s, and it was very difficult for them to support all of my care needs. So again, potentially travelling with other friends or family could be a good idea to have an emergency backup. But you need to be clear that they need to be able to perform that role, you know, for a few days to get somebody out there. Yeah, luckily my care budget was able to support a bit of double up wages. But yeah, it was a horrible situation. And again, perhaps maybe talking to your care funders about plans for the year and knowing you might need a little bit of a backup or emergency fund, something like that happen. You know, it's highly unlikely they'll help though, because they don't really want to support you on holiday in the first place. So again, just bear that in mind. Again, a few other things in emergency. Do you know your PA's next of kin? You know, do you know what medication they're on as well? You might have to communicate with them. And in terms of insurance, this was really eye-opening. So if you're like me, you probably thought that having travel insurance picks up the costs immediately, but it doesn't. In many foreign countries, it's private medical. You need a credit card to pay for things, even like they're calling out the ambulance. Hospitals want a credit card before they even do anything. So again, your insurance might take 6 weeks, 12 weeks to pay up. So can you afford to pay for a medical emergency there and then? So again, I would think about the travel insurance provider and actually putting all of you and your PAs on one policy and not separately. So bringing it to an end, returning home and booking the next trip. So, you know, you come back from a good holiday, you want another one. There's a certain feeling of that, having something to look forward to. Like, I can't profess to be the best role model here. I generally at the moment go back to the same place over and over again. It works well. I just don't have the time to research new destinations. My holidays are quite sacred. and I want to go somewhere that's really going to work for me, and I'm going to have a great time. And as much as I want to go somewhere new, I just at the moment don't really do that. I just want to go there and experience what I know is going to work for me. But don't let my outlook spoil yours. I think returning home is a good time to kind of reflect on what worked, what didn't, how you can make your next trip better. Take notes. Maybe think about were there any challenges you didn't anticipate? Did you discover new travel tips that you can share with other people? And then start planning for your next adventure. So the more confident you feel about exploring the world of your disability, the more you can do it. I think in my younger years, when I was less disabled, my mindset was a little bit different. I remember 12 years ago, which doesn't seem like that long ago, I was in Dubai, and I went on the rapids at the Atlantis Hotel with my friends. And realistically, looking back, how I snapped my legs and my arms, and I certainly wouldn't at 45 do that. I remember again, 25 years ago, I went to Ayia Napa with 20 friends. We drank every day for the best part of probably 18 hours a day. It wasn't an accessible place, but I had 20 strong chaps to kind of help get me around. So anything you want to do, you can do. But I think the key is to kind of work out your own routine, work out what works well for you. You can read as many articles, you can listen to me, but at the end of the day, it's down to you. I think kind of once you've done your first trip, your second trip and your third, you'll know what works for you. You'll have your own little strategy. And I guess, a phrase that I like to use a lot is, if it isn't broken, don't try and fix it. It's your life. Do what you want to do. Will I ever go somewhere new? Yeah, there's definitely some places on my bucket list, but I'm probably going to have to wait till I retire or my job is less stressful. So I think to wrap things up and then quickly answer your questions before I go and eat my dinner, it's difficult traveling with a disability. It requires more planning and support. The rewards are well worth it. The right preparation, as I've said, the world's your oyster. Whether that's you can enjoy all of it, researching it. Every step can be exciting and creates that unforgettable experience. So I guess kind of all that's left for you to do following the day is, go away, start planning your trip, and maybe add me on Instagram and share your pictures. I look forward to seeing your successes. Questions?
Thank you, Ross. Shall I start off with Delphine asked really early on, when she travels with her Hoyer lift and other materials, it's just so much for PAs to carry around, especially in the airport. Any tips?
So one, get a trolley and try and get it on a trolley. That still doesn't make it easy. What I would say, so it depends on, you only have to carry this stuff, I guess, at arrivals. You don't carry it through the airport, then you get it at baggage reclaim and get to your transport. So when you arrive, is there a member of your family that can drop you off, or a friend that can help you check in and get that equipment to the check-in desk? Because once you've got to the check-in desk, the Hoyer lift's gone, the hoist's gone, the shower chair's gone, your suitcase is gone. It's only you and your wheelchair really at that point. And then when you arrive at the other end, don't turn down that assistance. Quite often they'll follow you the whole way through. They'll ask how you're going from the airport and say, "Oh yeah, I need some help, mate. Can you help bring this to the taxi for me? Or I've got a hire car vehicle waiting for me. Any chance you can help me?" That's probably my tip on that one. And again, a few of the local currency, $10, $20 in someone's pocket. These people are paying minimum wage, so $20 tip to them is quite a nice little bonus.
Thank you. And Sam's asked, how do you manage with transferring from your wheelchair to the aisle chair and then into the plane seat? It's a good question.
Yeah, so I have got, and I'm not here to plug products and services, but I have got an Able Fly. So Josh Wintergill, who has SMA, he with Stelios created the easy travel seat. It's like a kind of sling with handles on. It's better than any of those airport slings that they try and use, and it also can work with a hoist as well. It's got hoist slings on it. Very briefly, I have been working on a project with Josh around an aisle chair that you'll be able to sit in for the duration of your flight, which will make things so much easier. But that's kind of it's in development at the moment. There's been 2 trials and they're looking to trial it on a flight later this year, so that might change things. But yeah, for now, I'd say the Able travel seat, easy travel seat. Josh Wintergill. That's where to go and get it from.
Yeah, there's quite. Well, I should probably say there's quite a few on the market now, and I have noticed some recently. They're going down in price as well, but they're very reasonable. I have a similar design one, and I've used it for 40 years. Brilliant, and it means that you can stay in control, can't you, Ross? So you can be in control about how and when you are lifted.
Yeah, and I always talk them through it. I make sure that they really clearly understand, and at check-in, I'm like, you need 2 or 3 people. You know, you need some strong people. I'm very clear, and I don't let them rush me. It's not my fault if the plane's delayed because they don't bring enough people. It's their responsibility to help do this safely. So don't be pressurized into doing it quicker than you feel comfortable with.
Thank you. He's also asked, how do you find hiring equipment, e.g. a portable hoist? Have you hired equipment, Ross?
No, I haven't. I take my own. What I have done recently, though, I've stayed at a couple of villas in the USA and in Spain that have all of the equipment there, and that tends to work, especially if they've got like a good reputable demand in terms of if it's too easy to book to stay there, then they probably don't get used that often. But if it's hard to book there, that tendency tells you that it works well for people. So yeah, that's what I do. I personally haven't rented it. I just don't want to take that chance. I'd rather know that my stuff works. It works for me, and my PA team know how to use it. Again, lots of companies do it. Some of the hire car companies have affiliations with equipment hire. So again, look at things like that.
Thank you. What portable hoist would you recommend for travelling with?
UpLift Smart 150. Nothing else. That's it.
Can you explain why?
Why? It's really solid. It folds up really easily. It comes with a case. You can get a hard case that it travels with, and it just does the job. And it's easy for one person to set up. Very easy for a PA to set up on their own. Maybe I should do a video of how to do that. Maybe I should do that. Put it on my YouTube or something.
That'd be really useful. Watch this space. Somebody else has asked, what's the best airline in terms of passenger assistance attitude to accessibility that you found?
Virgin Atlantic, probably. I'd say it's easier to tell you the worst. Emirates. They don't allow the passenger assistance teams on board to help. They use their own cabin crew, so I would avoid them as much as you can. But yeah, Virgin. Everyone's got their own experience. Some people say BA are good. Personally, I found Virgin to be really good.
Thank you. Do you have any recommendations for travel shower chairs?
Yeah, mine is called NU Prod X. I imported it from America. It folds up into a suitcase. Maybe I should do a video on that as well at some point. New NU PROD X. It was about £1,500. I probably bought it 5 years ago. It's probably been on 25 holidays, so I think it's returned its investment. If you think about hiring it, Maxwell McKnight, a friend of mine with SMA, he just put a new one on. I can't remember what it is. It's like a very cool looking one, but it wouldn't work for me because it doesn't have a cutout at the front of the seat, which I find a little bit awkward. So yeah, but yeah, maybe I can share that afterwards. Again, if anyone wants me, contact me outside of here. I can send you a picture of it and more details of it. And they replaced the seat free of charge recently as well after 5 years because the seat leaked.
Are you happy for us to share your contact details, Ross?
Yep, definitely.
I'll do it to all the people that have attended. I've got one last question, which I popped in the middle. And can you briefly tell us a little bit more about your work with the International Change in Places map and provision? You mentioned it briefly earlier, near the beginning of the talk.
Yeah, so there's a Change in Places map which lists the UK. But if you Google Change in Places International, there is a world map of Change in Places toilets. So I am one of the trustees, co-founders of Change in Places International. It's a slow burner. Like, it's real hard work to get the standards across the world. So in America, weirdly I know someone's mentioned UpLift here, which made me think they might be American. Like in America, for some reason, changing places facilities have beds, but they don't have the hoists. So that's the other thing. We are trying to make sure that the ones we put on our map meets the UK standards. But again, it's not guaranteed. I would try and use the pictures. In terms of time-wise, it would probably be a whole another 20 minutes on changing places international. What I would say is there's a lot of countries now adopting the UK standard. The Scandinavian countries are really starting to do it. Like McDonald's in Norway have just put a changing places facility in there, one of their restaurants, and it does meet all of the same UK standards. But what I would say is the map also, I think, shows them in different colours. I can't remember the colour. I think it's yellow if it's not quite fully got the UK standards. But yeah, I would say around the world there are very few of them like what you get in the UK, and that's what we're trying to do with Changing Places International, is get them to adopt the UK standard. But it's very difficult with different regulations in different countries, and I can't understand in America, the country where they love to sue each other, they would still want to lift people and injure their own backs. I would have thought they would have been the complete opposite, but yeah, no, very strange.
There were a few in Australia with very good facilities. Bondi Beach had one, so very good there. Anyway, thank you very much. Unless you have any other questions, I think we're going to tie it up there. I have one request for you all, please. Our events are funded by the National Lottery, and so a requirement of them is that we report back. So I'd really appreciate those people that are on this call if they could evaluate the session. There is a link to the evaluation form. It's a Google form in the chat at the top. It's a pink sticky note up the top there. I'll also paste it so in the current part of the chat as well. If you could please just spend a little bit of time at the end of this event just completing that Google form. A lot of them are multiple choice questions, so it shouldn't take you too long. Just to let you know that Sam said amazing. Thanks, Ross. It's all been super useful. And I'd like to echo that. And thank you ever so much. It's been brilliant. And we will send out your contact details, and I'll try and remember any of the products that you mentioned and send links to those as well. And thank you very much.
No worries. Thank you for inviting me, and good luck, everyone.